Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker. All right, everyone, welcome to episode 33 of Tokyo Wave. We are your hosts Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. This week we are joined by a special guest, Kirsten O'Connor, education consultant, founder and director of Quest Tokyo, and president of Few Japan.
On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
political happenings,
business,
and other random stuff.
Here are this week's top news highlights.
Sega Sammy to quit game arcade business in Japan.
Tokyo taxi drivers now allowed to refuse passengers not wearing masks.
Actor Sean Connery's death memorialized by the Japanese film crew who helped with the 1967 Bond film shot in Japan. This week in Japan.
All right, first up, Sega Sammy is going to quit the game arcade business in Japan.
GG Press has reported that Sega Sammy Holdings Incorporated said Wednesday it will pull out of game arcade operations in Japan by the end of this year, amid the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic.
The Japanese company will sell an 85% stake in Sega Entertainment, a subsidiary that operates amusement facilities, to Genda Incorporated, an arcade game rental firm.
Sega Entertainment is the third largest amusement facility operator in Japan. The sale comes as its game arcades have been struggling due to closures caused by the pandemic.
You know, this is really sad. The Sega arcades perhaps are some of the most visible around Tokyo, where you can see their massive blue Sega signs, and they're full of, game machines, purikura machines, and all of those other things that I think maybe we all did a lot 10 or 15 years ago, but haven't been in one recently. Maybe that's part of the reason why they're selling them all.
Yeah. So Sega Sammy will sell the Sega Entertainment stake on December 30th for an undisclosed sum. It will book some 20 billion yen in extraordinary losses for the year ending in March 2021.
So the company that will purchase Sega Entertainment, Genda Incorporated, will take over about 200 game arcades that Sega Entertainment runs across Japan.
So Genda's going to take them over, and they're still going to be operational, but the ownership will change.
Yes, and I think it's still unknown whether or not they'll retain the Sega branding.
Right. As you said, that's been a big staple of, Tokyo, right? Coming here. I think those arcades have been around since the 80s even.
Yeah, well, and also, Sega there was these big Joyopolis kind of amusement facilities that were like arcades on steroids. Like, I remember there was one really large facility in Odaiba that shut down a few years ago. But, this has been a long time coming. People just don't go to arcades like they used to.
Poor Sega. They lost out on the console wars, and now with this, yeah.
But they still have a long future in Japan thanks to pachinko machines. That's their main business,
I didn't know that.
Gambling saves the day again.
Up next, Tokyo taxi drivers now allowed to refuse passengers not wearing masks.
Kyodo News has reported that the Japanese Transport Ministry has decided to allow taxi drivers in Tokyo to refuse passengers who are not wearing face masks without a valid reason, amid persistent concern about the spread of the coronavirus.
The approval of the provision, requested by 10 taxi companies in the capital, could also affect the norms of etiquette in other areas of the country.
Japan's road transportation law stipulates that taxi operators cannot deny passengers unless they are heavily intoxicated or violent to drivers, among other limited special circumstances.
Taxi operators set rules based on the law that have to be authorized by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism.
The Tokyo taxi companies had asked the ministry to allow them to change part of the rules, as behavior such as drunk passengers speaking loudly without wearing masks would increase the risk of infection for taxi drivers.
A Transport Ministry official said, The provision does not endorse an across-the-board refusal of people who are not wearing face masks.
The Transport Ministry suggests taxi drivers should ask maskless passengers whether they have health or other unavoidable reasons for not wearing a mask. Wonder if they're going to do that. Something tells me they're just not going to stop.
Yeah. The ministry said the provision was approved to protect not only taxi drivers, but also subsequent riders.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19, taxi companies in Japan have been taking precautionary measures such as frequent disinfection of vehicles. Drivers are required to wear face masks and undergo body temperature checks as well.
On Wednesday, Tokyo reported 122 additional virus cases, bringing the capital's cumulative total to 31,624, the highest by far among Japan's 47 prefectures.
You know, I'm thinking about this. So Japan's road transportation law stipulates that taxi drivers cannot deny passengers.
Right.
Although, as a visibly obvious foreigner, have you ever seen an open taxi pass by you even though you were obviously trying to hail it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's happened. I think especially when I'm intoxicated. They can just sense it. Maybe I'm standing too much in the road or something.
They've got special technologies like, drunk gaijin, that's 2 strikes. Yeah. Sayonara.
No, but I mean, this is great. When coronavirus was a new thing in Japan, a lot of the reported cases were coming from taxi drivers, right? They were a big medium of the spread. Felt really bad for them, and this kind of seems a little late, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, this is November, and the pandemic started in January. So
yeah.
What took 11 months to decide this? This sounds like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Well, now, finally, anti-maskers. You are officially banned from riding in taxis unless you have a dumb excuse. In which case...
You're still banned.
Yeah.
All right, and up next, actor Sean Connery's death memorialized by the Japanese film crew who helped with the 1967 Bond film shot in Japan.
The Mainichi has interviewed a Japanese assistant director who took part in making the James Bond film You Only Live Twice with Sean Connery.
Kazuto Kawabe, age 89, spoke about his memories of the late Scottish actor to the Mainichi Shimbun, saying, "I wish I could have seen him again."
Kawabe was the former head of a screenwriting institute run by the Shochiku Film Studio in Japan.
Speaking to the Mainichi on November 1st, the day after he received the news that Connery had died, Kawabe said that Connery was difficult to please and a loner, but he also had a friendly side to him.
So it's just about a week ago when we got the news that, world famous Scottish actor Sean Connery passed away at age 90. At his home in the Bahamas. And he had sort of receded from public life, and I think there were reports that came out afterwards that he was suffering from dementia, but this immediately triggered an outpouring of memorials from around the world because, I mean, let's face it, Sean Connery was the best James Bond.
Oh, for sure. There's no doubt. I mean, definitely in America, he's perceived as such, I think.
Definitely. Well, I mean, as the first person who played James Bond, and honestly, the first movies were probably some of the best, if not the best, James Bond movies. So,
absolutely. Yeah, the one where he came to Japan was a classic. I loved it growing up. Had some cheesy stuff in the end.
Oh, it was so cheesy. It was kitschy in the sense that it was the stereotypical, foreign impression of Japan. And it's funny because it says here in the article that they actually had to rewrite parts of the script. And of course, we can't know for sure, but I would very likely guess that they probably put in some parts that were even more grotesque, and the Japanese team managed to write it out.
No, for sure.
But I mean, this was still 1967, so, foreign people hearing about Japan and writing something that took place in Japan. I mean, I can only imagine it was just full of misconceptions and racist stereotypes and other not so great stuff from the 60s.
For sure. Funny enough, my biggest memory of Sean Connery is in a movie that he starred in with Nicolas Cage called,
What?
called The Rock. Growing up, I loved this movie.
The Rock.
You know, I've come to...
What's the movie about, Aaron?
They're trying to save the world on like this island that was originally used for prisoners. And it's like these spherical green chemical things that can just explode and like blow up entire cities.
Was this movie from the 90s?
Oh yeah, it was 90s Nicolas Cage.
That sounds so 90s.
Yeah, and you know
Green blobs. I mean, that's a dead giveaway.
It's totally ridiculous. I've come to...
What was it with the 90s and green blobs?
I don't know. But
they were everywhere.
Yeah. It was just a thing they used in a lot of movies.
This script is terrible. There's no green blobs anywhere. Make a main character a green blob. Then we can call it blobs.
Yeah, you know, thinking back even to the 80s, there was a lot of green blobs, but yeah, but you know, I've come to, you know, hate Nicolas Cage, right? His movies are as hilarious as they are terrible.
I just got this mental image of Sean Connery saying, "What's with all these green blobs?"
There were a lot of green blobs in that movie, The Rock. They were like falling everywhere, and they had to like prevent them from like... They could easily... It was like a bubble thing. They could easily like splash, and like the virus would get everywhere and kill everyone. So
now I'm gonna have to watch this movie. Is it any good?
I mean, honestly, like it's 90s good. Have you seen Con Air?
Yeah. Con Air is good. I mean, Dave Chappelle was in Con Air.
Dude, I know. Dave Chappelle's so good. Con Air is like the worst movie, but also the best movie at the same time. That's why I love it.
Right.
You can laugh at how ridiculous it is.
So it's one of those movies that's so bad that it's good?
Exactly.
Right. Got it. All right. So back to the the matter at hand. So when the 1967 film You Only Live Twice was filmed on location in Tokyo, the Western Japan prefecture of Hyogo and the southwestern prefecture of Kagoshima, among other places in Japan, Kawabe had been chosen to be an assistant director on the Japanese crew for his ample experience filming in the air and in water.
When he introduced himself in English to Connery, Kawabe says the actor responded by saying that Kawabe's English was better than his own.
A typical British gentleman. Kawabe recalled how shooting with the British crew, who came from a very different cultural background from the Japanese crew, was not easy. For example, in a scene in which Connery wore a yukata, or lightweight kimono, the British costume staff had tied his obi belt around his belly in a very sloppy and unprofessional way.
Kawabe saw the poorly tied obi and immediately spoke out saying, "This is undignified. This must be tied at the hips," and retied the belt as the costume staff watched, looking dissatisfied.
In another instance, British prop staff had laid out futons across the threshold of a sliding door. The late Japanese actor Tetsudo Tamba, who was also in the film, pointed out, "We would never do this!" and had the staff rearrange the futon properly on the floor.
During the approximately 2-month-long shooting period, the British and Japanese staff grew friendly with each other. When shooting in the ocean in southwestern Kagoshima Prefecture, a small boat that Connery was on ran aground. Suddenly, the Japanese boatmen became extremely upset, saying that the British staff were calling him stupid. What they actually were doing was calling for help by saying, "Back up," which sounds like the Japanese word for baka. When the misunderstanding was resolved, everybody was able to laugh together. During breaks in the shooting, Kawabe went swimming in the ocean with Sean Connery.
Kawabe, let's go swimming. You can just picture it, right? About Connery's personality, Kawabe said that there were few people who could casually talk to a big star like Connery, so he was somewhat of a loner. But there was a charming side to him too, like when we saw each other for the first time in a while, he would jab me in the side.
The film, which had attracted attention from the time it was being shot, became a huge hit at the box office. There is a commemorative monument engraved with the autographs of Connery and Tanba in the Kagoshima prefecture city of Minamisatsuma, where Connery and the crew were on location for the movie, making the place a holy site for fans of the movie. Even now, after more than a half century has passed since the movie has hit theaters around the world, Kawabe is still very aware of how popular Connery is.
Speaking of filming locations, I just had lunch at the Niotani Hotel, which in the movie You Only Live Twice was the location that was used as the evil villain's headquarters.
Ah, right.
And so that was actually 1967. I think it was right before the hotel opened its new building.
Mm-hmm.
So it was still sort of under construction, but they were able to put a big sign on it that said, I think it was like Sato Corporation or something like that.
Very cool.
Or was it Osato? But yeah, it was so 1960s. And
Wow.
so that's still a really, I think that's also another kind of holy land for fans of the film. But
sure.
I've never checked out this place in Minami Satsuma. I'm kind of intrigued now.
No, for sure. Kagoshima's great too.
Kawabe, while looking nostalgically at the script and schedules from the film that he has carefully preserved, said that, "For me, Sean was more like a friend with whom I spent my youth with than a star." The staff from that Bond movie all lived long lives, but he's finally gone.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave.
All right, so today we're together with Kirsten O'Connor. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Kirsten was a class teacher and borough-leading maths teacher in London before moving to Tokyo in 2001. During her 17 years at the British school in Tokyo, she was head of years 1 and 2, deputy head teacher, and for the final 6 years, served as head teacher of the primary school.
Kirsten's company, Quest Tokyo, was launched in 2018 and offers a range of educational services and tutoring to the Japanese and international communities in Tokyo.
Kirsten also serves as education director for Clarence Education Asia, where she is involved with developing and opening new international schools and outdoor education opportunities in Japan.
Her educational background includes a bachelor's degree in primary education and English, a master's in educational leadership, and the UK National Professional Qualification for Headship.
An entrepreneur member of the British Chamber of Commerce in Japan, Kirsten is also an active fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, the Japan Fellows Network, and also serves as the current president of FEW Japan. All right, so let's get started. And again, I think every time we have an esteemed guest with a really high educational background, Aaron and I have a habit of feeling ridiculously stupid. And I feel like we have the perfect pairing, though, because you have so much experience with educating young children, and we both have a mental age of about 5. So
Perfect.
you're in good company today.
We'll be fine today then. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. And, one of the things we like to ask our guests is, what is your Japan story or your history of coming to Japan?
Yes, an interesting one. I moved here in 2001. I was quite adamant with my parents that I would be here for 2 years. I promised them avidly that I would be here for 2 years, and that was in 2001. Prior to that, I didn't have any connection to Japan. I applied for an overseas overseas teaching job, and got it, and then arrived at the British school in Tokyo, having never visited or having actually never been to Japan, to start my new job in the summer. And so ever since then, I very quickly fell in love with the city and life in Tokyo, and I've been here ever since.
And so in Tokyo, where is the British school?
The British school is actually on 2 campuses. So the youngest children from age 3 to 7 are based in Shibuya. And then the larger campus is on the Showa Women's University campus, which is where the 8-year-olds all the way up to the top of the high school, the 18-year-olds.
And so that's in Sangenjaya.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's actually the Shibuya campus currently is quite close to our studio today.
Yes, just down the road.
Has it always been there, or?
That's where the school originally opened.
Really?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
yes.
Wow.
30 years ago, that's the original site. Not the original building. There's been a
Yes.
replacement of building in that time, but yes, that's where it opened in the first place.
It's right on the south side of Cat Street.
It is right on the end of Cat Street. That's right.
Meow.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background in education. What inspired you to focus on early education specifically?
Yes, I decided I wanted to be a teacher when I was 7. Actually, my grandmother, when I told her that, said, "You'll never be rich." And I remember saying at the time, "Oh, that doesn't matter." She's actually right. On hindsight, I should have listened. But no, I made that decision when I was 7. And then from that point on, all the educational decisions that I made for study and university and so on were all linked to that. And so I graduated with a teaching and English degree. And I went to work for my first teaching posts in central London in quite a sort of socio-economically deprived area, which was quite different from the places that I had done all my teaching practices, which had been in Kent in sort of rural schools. And so I went up to inner London and certainly learnt my teaching skills there, let's say. But it was a fantastic experience because a lot of the children there came into schools at very, very low levels of literacy and numeracy. And of course, the curriculum includes lots more subjects than that. But schools are judged on how well children achieve in those core areas. The results of those areas are published. And so we were always incredibly proud that the children came in really low, but they left at, and sometimes above, the national average, which you might think, well, whoopee-doo, the national average. But actually, if you looked at, we were always at the bottom of the league tables for schools because of the area that we were in. But if you flipped that table and looked at the value that you added to those children, we were absolutely at the top because the progress that they made from the work that we did with them. So in difficult circumstances, we really made a difference. So I learned everything about teaching in that environment, about how to help children make progress and really grind that progress from children.
Wow, that sounds like such an experience, though. I'm sure that must have been like something out of a movie scene where you've spent all of this experience in these like posh sort of wealthy communities, and all of a sudden you come up to this school and it's like, oh, who the hell are you?
It was a little bit like that, it was quite eye-opening. It wasn't an area that I had lived in or had spent a lot of time in my sort of younger years, and so it was quite eye-opening but hugely rewarding. And as I say, those inner London boroughs in that area were funded quite well for education, and they often tested things in those schools. And I don't mean anything sinister, but I mean curriculum developments. And so we were always on the front foot of maths development teaching or the teaching of English. And so we were well trained, very quickly well trained. So it was enormously helpful.
Wow, that sounds the exact opposite of the way it is in the United States. Oh, you're a school in a bad neighborhood? Well, how about no budget?
Well, budgets were tight, but yeah, still perhaps quite different, yeah.
Do you think it's that experience that solidified your decision to continue into education and continue on that route? I've been in education right the way through. There's kind of not been really any negotiation in my mind that's the area that I love and that I'm absolutely obsessed with. It's really all I talk about. I can be really quite boring at times, but I'll try not to be today. But it was quite a leap moving to Japan. I taught for 7 years in London. And then I decided I needed another promotion. I'd already become coordinator of maths and English, maths and science in those schools. And I decided, right, now I need an opportunity to lead people within teams. And so I needed a new job. I just happened to look at the time, we didn't look for jobs on the internet in those days. We had newspapers on the coffee table in the staff room, and the back of the newspaper were all the international jobs, and you would periodically glance through there and look at schools that were in the sunshine and not in the areas that we were living, where a treat for lunch would be you'd go to the petrol station and get a sandwich from there. That would be a treat. And so I just happened to be looking through the international jobs and saw a job that really caught my eye, which was the British school, BST, and applied for it, and here I am. So that was in 2001. Wow.
I have to ask, are there any other destinations that you seriously considered?
None.
Really?
No, I just applied for that. And actually there had been a seed sown in my ear because I'd been mentoring a younger teacher in the school that I was in, and she had done she'd done her years, and she did a couple of years more, and then she moved to school and went to the British school in Tokyo, and it must have just sat in my mind somewhere. And so when this job came up with the lion logo and some really superb pictures, I thought, I'm going to go for that, and that was that.
Wow. What was that like? So you came to Japan in 2001. Did you have like a first experience? You get off the airplane, you're in Japan. Was it your first time to come to Japan?
Yes. Yeah. I'd never been to Japan. I mean, I'd been to Asia, but I'd never been to Japan. And I didn't know really what to expect, except from the advice that I'd been given from some of the other teachers that had been here. But yeah, I had no ideas. I mean, it started at Heathrow where we were delayed by 4 hours. And you can imagine, the whole family are at Heathrow waving you off for 2 years. So everybody's sobbing. And there was a typhoon. So we were delayed for 4 hours. So we had 4 hours more sobbing before we could actually get on the plane. But no, it's still a very vivid memory of a whole bunch of us all flying together on the flight and arriving, and the British school bus picking us up and arriving. And my very first memory is getting on that bus and somebody giving me a sausage roll with mustard in it. And now I think, what? That's very un-Japanese, but yeah. And
welcome to Japan. Here's your sausage roll.
Have a sausage roll with mustard in it. Yeah, exactly. That's bizarre. And of course, sausage rolls here do not taste the same as they do in the UK. So I was quite disappointed. But yeah, and then straight to school. And I really quickly fell in love with the city, though. I didn't feel, a lot of people arrive and they have culture shock, but I didn't feel that I had that because I'd lived in London. So the city life wasn't a big shock, and the cost of living wasn't really much different from the UK. But yeah, I very quickly.
Now it's cheaper, isn't it?
A lot of things are cheaper here, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Wow. And so I know you're also president of FEW Japan, and I'm familiar with FEW Japan, but I'm not very confident in properly explaining it. So could you tell us what is the organization and what are you focused on?
Yeah, for sure. FEW Japan is an association for women. It's 40 years old next year. So this is not a new group of people. It was started a very long time ago, and we will be celebrating our 40th anniversary next year. And the goal of the community is to create community through connection, but also through learning. So we have a lot of events where people will come and present, or our members will present. And the whole goal is that we connect people together and people feel that community amongst. If you imagine, right now we have a fantastic opportunity with that. If you imagine what working here in the 1980s was like for women, it will have been considerably different to now. And when FEW first started, it was FEW currently stands for Empowering Women, but when it first started, it was Foreign Executive Women. And so you can understand where the need for that kind of a group grew from, because I'm sure that they will have been very isolated. If you think even now with the imbalance of sort of the gender imbalance in offices right
just
now.
Imagine,
you can imagine
a global company in the 1980s saying, oh, we'll just send one of our female executives to Japan, just roll the dice, see how it works.
That's right, exactly. So it started then. And so now I am the current president, and it's a group that's run by volunteers. So the board and I are all volunteers. So we have a tenure, and we organise all the events that go through the year. So we organise a monthly event. We also organise monthly lunches. We organise peer-to-peer support groups, which is every 2 months. And we also have some special events that happen. So of course we always have a Bonnenkai, which is always great fun. But every 2 years we have an enormous event called the CSS, which is the Career Strategy Seminar. And this is an event which we organise on a Saturday. It's a full day event where we invite speakers, and it's all about career, and for women to reflect on whether they're pivoting in their career, what they're looking at in terms of if they're entrepreneurs and small business, but also thinking about how you look after yourself within that parameter. And we just ordinarily we have that in May, and it's a big event. We hire a venue and we have more than a dozen speakers. This year has been a very interesting year for FEW Japan. We had to make the decision in March that all of our events went online, and so we had to make the decision to put our CSS. We postponed it to October, hoping that we would be able to be back in person by then. We all know the story, and so we weren't able to. So this year we did our very first CSS online, which was a full day. We had 16 speakers. We had a gold medal winning Olympic athlete for the closing speech. And we started at 10 in the morning and we finished at 6 in the evening. So none of us are specialists in technology. So this was something we were quite impressed with ourselves that we managed it.
Wow, that must have been quite the undertaking.
It was quite the undertaking, but we were delighted because our biggest concern, and I'm sure this is the same for many organisations right now, is that when we're meeting online, how do you distill and pass through that energy that you get from when you come to a few meetings? Because often our meetings are usually on Thursday night, and I can pretty much guarantee that the night that our few meetings on, it will be raining, and so it's almost, well, it's ridiculous. It's pretty much clockwork, and so often people are, you're dragging yourself out to go to the few meeting, but without a doubt, every single time you go out of there and you're buzzing with the energy, you've met new people, you've talked about something interesting, and it's taken you forward either in business or in life. And our community is really diverse. So we've got young women, we've got older women, we've got women who are in business, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got people who are mums, we've got people who are developing all sorts of different initiatives in the city. So it's a really great community, and I feel very privileged to be running it at the moment with a fabulous team of volunteers on that board. They're a real dynamic team. It's fantastic.
That sounds like a fabulous organization. And I had heard about FEW Japan, obviously being not a woman. I've never been to a meeting, but I didn't know that it was 40 years old.
Yes, yeah. And we've had quite a landmark this year in that we've actually incorporated this year for the first time.
As a general incorporated association?
Yeah, we're a not-for-profit association. Which means we've been able to change our sponsorship strategy. So we have now got 2 additional membership types for companies that want to further support the women's community in Tokyo and beyond. And so we have a corporate sustaining membership, and those are for companies who want to donate in excess of 500,000 yen for a year, for 2 years, or organizational membership, and those are for smaller companies who want to donate 100,000 yen. And what that's doing is it's enabling us to bring down the cost of the membership, but also to bring in specialist support, because 40 years ago and now, our operations are quite a lot more complicated with our website. We're a commerce-based website, and so we need that kind of specialist experience, and similarly with accountancy and so on. So there are costs associated now. So that's why we've been looking for that.
Yes, and definitely running and sort of a volunteer organization in Tokyo is so difficult because everything costs money. And when you don't have some sort of a revenue generation model, you end up having to basically ask members, please give me money, please give me money, please give me money. And it just becomes this sort of annual cycle of beggary that has to go on in order to keep the organization working.
Yeah, and we do still have a membership fee, but we're hoping that as this is a new initiative, so we're in the first few months of it actually, we're hoping that as years go forward, that kind of system and the kind of investment we might get from sponsors will grow. So if anybody feels like getting in touch with FEW Japan to be a sponsor, do let me know.
That's a really good top tip. Check out FEW Japan, and you are currently actively seeking for sponsorship opportunities for both large companies and small and medium enterprises.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, there's a lot of need for women's voices in the workplace and in the community at the moment, and we are that community. So if you need somebody who you want somebody to talk about education, or you want somebody to talk about something else, you can come to us, and you can find those people. But also I think it's really incumbent on business and industry right now to support the development and the sort of integration of women into work.
I think the theme of womenomics in Japan has been recurring ever since Kathy Matsui coined it about 5 years ago. But it seems, especially in the realm of Japanese policies, that it's a lot of talk, but not so very much action. I think just a few months ago, there was a news report that came out that said the government is lowering its target for inclusion of female executives in the workforce because Japanese companies just weren't able to keep up with the suggested ratio.
They've put it back to 2030. to reach a 30% target is 30% is the target, and they've put it back 10 years because of COVID.
That's terrible. Like, because of COVID, it's a pandemic. We just got to push the women back just another decade.
It's just ridiculous.
Just a problem with the timing.
Yeah. So, Few Japan is a community that empowers women. And so we're always looking for people who are looking to support that.
Very cool. If I may ask, I imagine there's quite a few, expats in Few Japan. Is there quite a lot of Japanese participation as well?
Aaron, that's a really good question. Actually, that's one of the developments over the last 10 or 15 years, that originally the group was predominantly expats, but the goal has long term now been to diversify that membership. So yes, there's lots of Japanese members and from all different nationalities. The commonality is that we speak English. So there's a necessity for that. But yes, lots of different nationalities, but lots of Japanese women in there, young women as well.
Well, I think that's really interesting because I have, maybe I wouldn't say mentored, but I've talked to a lot of aspiring Japanese female executives in global companies in Japan, and they face a lot of challenges in trying to build their profile as a female executive in a bilingual environment. And I think both foreign women and Japanese women alike face similar challenges in the corporate environment in Tokyo. And there is, other than Few Japan, I don't think there are many forums for them to exchange information and learn from each other.
I agree. And actually, it's a very lonely place for a lot of women, particularly if you're in a frustrating situation where you haven't really got a voice. And so Few Japan does offer that. And that's why I feel after a Few Japan meeting, you leave there and you feel like you've made friends and you have been empowered. There's a confidence that comes from that. Of course, it doesn't solve every problem, but it does feel that you're shoulder to shoulder with other women. And I think that's really valuable and needed.
So if you're interested in joining Few Japan, how does one go about doing that?
Well, we have a website, fewjapan.com, I think. It is fewjapan.com. And on there, you'll find information about membership. But you can always contact us through the communications@fewjapan.com website, email address as well. And we can give you more information there. We've got, so one of our directors is a membership director, and she's very happy to chat with potential members.
All right. No, this is really the first time that I've gotten to hear about Few Japan. I think a lot of our listeners probably have heard the name and maybe have heard about events going on, but I had no idea. I've been here for 14 years. No idea, 40 years old organization, and some of the things that you're involved with. That's amazing.
Well, this year has been particularly a challenge to take the organisation online. So one of the benefits of that has been that we've been able to reach women on a far greater range than just in Tokyo. So we now have, for our CSS, we had women from all over Japan, but also from Singapore, from the Middle East, from London, and from America, which we ordinarily wouldn't have been able to do. So in some ways, COVID is quite the pain, as we all know, but it has enabled us to make some headway towards a goal that we've been looking at for a long time, which is there are women around Japan who are isolated too, and they can't always get to meetings, of course, that are in central Tokyo. They're in Shizuoka and wider areas, and so this has enabled that. So we do have members joining, but also non-members joining meetings as well. So.
Very cool. It's great to get the word out about that.
Definitely. Well, and also, I had one thing. So I thought if you were a new female executive coming to an assignment in Tokyo or Japan in general, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
Join Few.
There you go.
No, I'm being flippant. Joining Few is good advice, actually, because you need community, you need connections, and there's a lot of working women here.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave.
And moving back to education, you were headmaster at one of Tokyo's top international schools. What was that experience like? And did you face any big challenges?
Good questions, both. being the head teacher of a school is an incredible honour. It's a huge responsibility, of course, but it is an incredible honour. And you move through your career into that job having, responsibility originally for a class, and then for a department, and then for half the element of the school, and then you become the head, and then you're responsible for the development and the outcomes for all of those children. So it really is an incredible honour and privilege, and I felt that all the way through. And I was quite lucky because I was at BST for 17 years. So I'd already been in the school 11 years before I took on the role of head teacher. So I knew the history of a lot of where all the systems came from and where our family background and what the expectations were. It was when I took over as head. Very quickly, the UK changed their curriculum, and so very quickly I had to implement a new curriculum right the way across the school, which was a challenge, interesting but a challenge. And of course, recruitment when you're overseas is always really difficult, and so making sure that you can have the best vision and the best image of what you want to achieve. If you haven't got the team with you, it's very difficult to do that. So finding those little diamond teachers around the world, and I always felt very guilty driving around the UK. I used to, when we recruit, we would interview online here, and then I would fly to the UK and I would drive around the country visiting the teachers in their schools that we had shortlisted.
Oh, wow.
And then they would come to London for an interview, and I felt like I was just driving around the country picking all the best bits out and just taking them, bringing them all back to Tokyo, much to those head teachers' chagrin. But it was again a privilege as well. When you're a long way, we were a British school, so we had the English national curriculum, but of course we were a private school, so that we didn't have to do, there was no mandatory aspect to it. So we picked the best bits, and you needed people to come from the UK with very up to date practice to make sure that the school was completely up to date. So that was a benefit. Challenges. What challenges I faced? Well, I think the biggest one, not necessarily as a head, but it was just in the year prior to becoming a head, was the earthquake in 2011, and that really was quite the day. I was the deputy head at the time, and the head teacher of the primary school and the principal of the school were in the UK doing recruitment. And so I was acting principal and head of primary at that time, and at that time they would go for 2 weeks, so they would do all their visits in schools, and then they do a week of interviews, and then they would come back. And it was the Friday of the end of those those 2 weeks, and I went to the staff room to get a cup of tea, and which was on the 6th floor of the building, and it was about 2:30, and I made my tea, and I was just talking to a colleague, and I was saying, "Oh, it's brilliant. We've had 2 weeks. There hasn't been a broken leg. We haven't had an allergic reaction. We haven't had any problems, and they'll be back over the weekend, and we can get back to normal." And I was just really patting us all on the back for managing to get through. And then we thought, "Oh, that was a little bit of an earthquake." And then, oh God, and then that was that.
Wow.
That changed the course of the rest of the afternoon.
I have to ask, did the tea spill?
The tea went down on the table very quickly as I moved towards the door, but
wow.
that was quite an afternoon. That was the biggest challenge I've faced actually in my teaching career.
And that was basically, you were the person in charge for basically checking on the safety of how many students?
Well, I was in charge of the primary school, but I was at that time I was at Shibuya, and the primary school split on 2 sites at BST. So I would spend half my week in Shibuya and half my week at Showa. Yes. And at that time I was at Shibuya, so I was taking care of the students there. We had a head of secondary who was on the other campus, and so he was watching there, and we had the deputy head on the other campus as well of primary, so they were responsible there. But yeah, there were 350 children in Shibuya, and then we had another 300, 400 up at Showa as well. And
wow.
So it was quite the afternoon. People, as our teachers, actually everybody, the kids and the teachers and the parents were absolutely incredible. I mean, it was scary. And, you have all sorts of different protocols in school, but when something like that happens as a head, you run around, once it's settled, you run around, all the children are under the tables, and you run around the school to check everybody's okay. And I would look at each teacher, and they would be looking at me with these enormous eyes and this kind of grey looking face, like, oh my God, written all over their face. And then they would turn around to their classes and say, "Don't worry, everything's fine," with a big smile on their face. They were just fantastic. And there was really only one person I had to say, I had to put in the cupboard and say, "Pull yourself together," and then come back out. And they did. They were fantastic. But it was right across dismissal time. So we were, it's 2:45 in the afternoon. So we were busy trying to dismiss the children. So it was, and yourselves, there were lots of aftershocks. And so all the way through that, we were, the children were coming down the stairs, and then they were having to go into classrooms and go under the tables, wait for the aftershock, come back out, go down another floor, under the tables while the aftershock, come back out. And we were just kind of stage managing children being reunited with their parents. So
that must have been a long day.
It was a very long day. And you
Wow.
go, and the challenge was, as a leader, you have lots of different leadership feathers to your bow, if you like. And in that kind of situation, you go straight into commander mode. You are literally, I am saying, you do this, you do this. That's not my normal MO, but you very quickly do that. So it was one of those days whilst making sure you can stand up, because your own knees have gone with the anxiety. So, but no, everything was fine and everything went smoothly. The last child got picked up at 8:15 p.m. at Shibuya, and then we went.
And that was because the parents just couldn't get there.
That's right.
Because I was in Makuhari in Chiba when the earthquake hit, and to get from there to where I was living in Yoyogi at the time by car, it took about 9 hours.
Yeah, that's right. All the roads just clog instantly. Well, they close all the highways as well, so everything stops. So yeah, we waited for parents to get to us, and then on the other campus at Showa, we were there until 3 a.m. The last parent arrived.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
So and then we went back and looked at our houses with all our CDs over the floor and things like that. So yeah, it's quite an experience.
So kind of coming to the present tense, and also kind of thinking about what you're doing now at Quest Tokyo. I know that international parents of children in Tokyo, especially long-term residents, have a hard time figuring out the best schooling options. And perhaps the biggest hurdle is, of course, language education, with no seemingly perfect solution available. What advice would you give to parents trying to figure out the best path forward for their children?
This is a question I'm asked probably twice a week.
Oh, wow.
And I can absolutely understand why that is. And at Quest Tokyo, as a company, we offer lots of different services, and a lot of that does encompass supporting families with English for various different reasons. But you're right, it is very difficult to make that decision, whether you are a dual nationality family, or you're a family that hasn't got that profile. It's difficult to make those decisions because international schools are expensive, and also the Japanese schools, particularly for elementary school children, are excellent and often just on your doorstep. And so you do have to make those decisions. I think the advice I always give, the same advice, is every family is different, and you have an appetite and a budget for a different pathway. So you have to factor in that. But if you want your child to be fully native reader and speaker and writer of Japanese, you have to put your children into the Japanese schools. You will almost certainly not get that if you were in an international school without putting in a lot of extra effort on top of the curriculum provision for that subject. And so I always would say, if you have got the appetite, but also the ability to put your children into Japanese schools, it's a good opportunity, but you do need to be able to read and interact with all of the expectations. And I know that's a challenge for some families. So if you can do that, do it. But also the thing to remember is you need to stay long enough for them to have truly embedded the reading and the writing skills. You can't leave halfway through that process. We all know that the amount of kanji and the amount of course, the hiragana and the katakana comes first, but the kanji study goes right the way through elementary school and, of course, beyond into junior high as well. But you need to give it a good, solid amount of time to really get that embedded in, and that natural ability to converse in that language, not just in a casual sense, but in a more formal sense too. So I would always recommend that if you can. However, if you do want your child to be an English reader and writer, you've got to supplement it. And so you do need to keep this study of English reading and writing going at the same time. In terms of speaking, and this is more for, not so much for education, but more at home, I think most research points to the fact that if you've got two languages between both parents, one parent sticks to one and the other parent sticks to the other one. That's very, very difficult to do. But if you can do it, it does create a much more authentic language acquisition opportunity for children. But it is a challenge, particularly if the child knows that you speak more than one language fluently. So they will go in between the two.
Right. So I guess for the academic side, you kind of have to pick one or the other. But for speaking, you can have a hybrid model at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a challenge. You've got to choose one way or the other, because you can't keep flip-flopping in and out of schools. So you have to plump for one of those directions. But I think it's also worth being really careful with how you make decisions for each of your children, because even within a family, you might find one child really has a much greater propensity for studying in Japanese and wants to be in that cultural environment, and then you might have a sibling who really wants to be in a more English speaking environment and be more international. And I think it's difficult to make one blanket decision for both of those children, or however many children. So I would recommend suit the children that you've got.
That is such a good point, and I feel like probably that's difficult advice to give to parents, because they think that it's almost, I've talked to several parents of bilingual children in Tokyo, and it's like talking to them about how they want to teach their kids. It's like talking to someone in the South about where they go to church. They have very strong opinions on the decisions that they've made.
Yeah, and rightly so, of course. And it's absolutely your decision.
But I guess it's that kind of age-old sort of tension between parents and children, because what the parent thinks is best might not be what the child wants to do.
That's right. And that's particularly true when the children are different ages. When they're younger, of course, you're making the decisions. And it's often driven by different factors that kids don't understand. Money. Kids don't understand that. You can't, international schools are expensive. But when they're younger, you're making that decision. When they're older, and I'm talking about sort of getting to the age of 8, 9, 10 age, you can get a sense from children by talking to them about where their preferences are. And I have worked with families where their children have, one of the children is at international school and the other one doesn't want to go. Has built a life, has built a friendship group, has built an interest base in a school and wants to continue with that. And so I think forcing them to do it at that age can be quite problematic. And in many ways, kids will dig their heels in. If they don't want to learn, they won't. So, if the English is going to be a struggle, it's going to be a struggle. So you have to help them with that.
I don't know if we were in this conversation together, but I remember hearing a horror story from someone who there were two kids and they both went to the same international school, but one of them had a really bad experience and left that school and went to a Japanese school. And their experience at the international school was so bad that they wouldn't go to their siblings' graduation. So they just absolutely would not go back to that school.
I can believe it. I jumped around high schools, actually.
I would hope that would be an isolated case, and that there would be there's a distinct reason for that, and somebody ought to look into that.
Yeah. Well, it might have been the other way around too. I'm not so specific on the details. It might have been a Japanese school that they had the bad experience at, but it's what is it? Kids in schools, kids don't want to go to school. They want to go party and play video games all day. So.
I'm very pleased I haven't met too many of those. But if a school's doing a great job, and kids love learning, they're thirsty to learn. If you're doing a great job engaging them and the curriculum's exciting and there's plenty of enrichment opportunity, kids love going to school. They want to see their friends. I think none more so than right now. Having had 6 months off school between March and September, these children were desperate to get back to school, and they are appreciating their classrooms, their environment, their friends and their teachers far more than they've ever done.
I've heard about this. It was really heartbreaking to see during graduation here in Japan back in, April? There's so many videos of, them having to do it on Zoom and everyone's crying because, they can't be in person. And it brought back memories to me, and it made me think, wow, if this was going on during my high school graduation or, college graduation, that would just, destroy me. Those are just such, pivotal moments for us, right?
It has been a very difficult few months for schools and for students and families, parents as well. But unfortunately, it's been something that's been out of everybody's control. And there has had to have been a system of maintaining learning. And online learning does offer that. But you can't deny, particularly for younger children, the necessity of being in person. They need that connectivity. And even with older students too. But it has been a very challenging situation.
I think we're also starting to touch on the social aspect of school, and that leads me to the next question. Of course, I'm also sure in your work, you're also working with the children of global executives who often move around between countries and cities. Is there anything that you would suggest parents facing frequent location changes do to help their children adjust to new schools and also new cities?
For children that jump around schools, it's not ideal, and we all know that. But in an international setting, children are often moving. It's perhaps been a little less so in the last few years when the transient nature of families has dropped a bit in Tokyo, where we used to have a lot of families, the majority of families were coming in for 3 years, then going, their contracts were finished and they were going off. We've got far more longer term families in schools now. But I think if you are in a situation where you're moving school to school, there are some tips I would give. I mean, one is knowing exactly what kind of school you're going to. Often, if you're choosing a curriculum, and there may not be a lot of choice. If you're going to somewhere like Singapore or Hong Kong, you might have 3 or 4 different choices for a British curriculum or an American curriculum. If you're coming to Tokyo, that's not the case. There is one American school, there is one British school. So if you're in that situation, know the school you're going to and know what the parameters that you're going to be operating with. So I mean, I'm kind of getting around to the point of manage your expectations. If you are coming from a school that has had rugby pitches and acres of grass, and you are coming to a school in the middle of a city, know the difference and prepare your children for that. So manage their expectations. There are pros and cons of being in the city or being in the countryside. So be prepared to manage that. Children are very resilient, but they do they always mirror how their parents are behaving. So I've seen it many times where a family has not settled well into the city and their children therefore do not settle well into school. It almost always mirrors one and the other. And so I would say as a parent, give your new school time to settle. Don't panic about it and try not to show that to your children. So I would say kind of model the behavior that you want to see in your children, which is resilience. Oh, it's going to be difficult at the beginning, but we know if we stick with it, things will get better. Oh, we'll make friends. It's hard to make friends at the start, isn't it? But everybody's new, or there'll be new children coming. So I think that if we model the behavior as parents, then that helps students.
I'm sure parents don't like hearing that, though.
It's difficult. Well, I think the kind of parents that are moving around the world are pretty familiar with knowing this kind of thing. It just doesn't help children if a child is not settling to have the parent almost overindulge that not settling. They have to develop that resilience. And to be honest, in international schools, most children settle really smoothly because the children that are welcoming them into the class are used to doing that. And so they open, the arms are open, they're coming in and they're warmly welcoming them in. It's just helping them manage the expectations from the different places that they're coming from. It's often facilities. Yeah,
the international schools in Tokyo especially, you've got a really a diverse educational background you're looking at. I remember when I went to university at Sophia in Yotsuya here, I was together with a lot of people who graduated from international schools around Tokyo. And it always blew my mind. It's like, oh, well, I went to high school in Geneva and I went to high school in Bangkok. And I was like, well, I'm from Tennessee. At the,
It is definitely, there's definitely there's an identifiable group of people who've had an international education, and there are huge benefits to it where you're, very comfortable with people from around the world, and you've got that resilience and that bounce back ability and the ability to make friends because you're used to that transience. So there is a real benefit to it.
I'm so jealous. As Parker was saying earlier, I think definitely growing up in the U.S., all that was on my mind was skipping school and playing video games, playing music. I hear about kids in international schools out here, and like the school that you're at. I was very thirsty for knowledge, and I didn't even know it until I got to college. I started studying foreign language. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Why didn't I do this in high school? So.
That's what I mean. If a curriculum is good and the students are engaged, that is fun. Students love that.
Absolutely. So, it's addictive. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're an American listening to this podcast from the United States and thinking, wow, man, why are the education systems in other countries so much better than they are in the United States? It's not that the other countries are so much better. It's just that the one in America is so bad. It's really bad.
Well, we need to be careful with that, I think.
We can say that.
You can say it.
In where I'm from in the state of Tennessee, I mean, school teachers make about the same as a manager at McDonald's.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm from Florida, so
it's
that was supposed to be the
school teaching or gator shooting. You gotta pick one profession, about the same pay grade.
Don't want to get those mixed up either.
Oh man, no, but I mean, I'd love to get your if you have any comments on education in America, because this is definitely
in America is such an enormous country, and every state has its own system for everything, but particularly for education. And within those systems, you've got excellence, and you've got poor quality teaching and learning. And so it's very difficult to comment on the education system in America, I think. I think the commonality amongst it is it's very embedded in American culture. So I was recommend to families, if you're planning for your child to go to university in America, then you should think about the American school here, because it's a cultural preparation for the kind of life that you might live on those campuses. It's quite different to a British university campus. So
yeah, I think with one of my Japanese friends, we were watching the new Cobra Kai recently, where they're all fighting each other in the school, and it's extremely violent. And my Japanese friend is like, are all American schools really like this? And I'm like, no, this is just a movie. But then I started thinking, oh, wait, actually, there's lots of gang violence. So yeah, it kind of is in a way. We're not doing karate, but
we're just whooping each other's asses. Yeah. That's what we do.
It's kind of close to the truth.
America.
Well, all school systems have their challenges. None of the school systems are perfect. And I think everybody would agree with that. There are pros and cons in all systems. You just have to find the niche that works for you. And actually, when you're an international student, that's when you've got the luxury of choosing that. Like, you can be an American here, and you can be at the British school. You can be at a school that's doing the IB. Whereas in the UK, in the US, you've got less of that choice, haven't you?
Yes. Mm-hmm. When I came to Japan, and I heard you either had to have an SAT score or an IB. I'm like, what is an IB? An IB? What's that?
I was actually an IB student up until second year of high school.
I couldn't even pronounce it. International Baccarat?
Is it baccalaureate?
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Wow. Okay, I got it. But my school was in Florida, and things went to complete chaos. So I switched schools. But yeah.
One thing that I'm kind of recalling my own traumatic grade school experience in the United States, and especially with international schools in Tokyo, and you also had the experience of training in sort of more wealthy areas and then actually starting your teaching career in an inner city area. And I think a lot of the international schools in Tokyo have the habit of getting a little bit on the elitist side, because obviously you're in a big city, you've got all of these, my dad's an ambassador, my dad's the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and you've got a lot of these kids who have a very privileged existence. But how do you kind of teach children a sense of humility in this sort of a situation? How do you prepare them for the reality that not everybody is rich and famous?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to challenge the perception that international schools are that, because they're not. those people are in those schools, but the international schools in Tokyo have a range of families, right from families who can afford to go to the schools and families that really find it really difficult to go to those schools. So it's not as black and white as that. A lot of the teaching of that kind of humility comes from the culture and the ethos within the school, and it has to come from the messages that you give, not just in curriculum, but by the way you model behaviour as a faculty, but also how you sort of engender that amongst the children. So things like the personal social health education curriculum contains that, but then also you might have assemblies where you're talking with all of the children and you're talking about broader messages about how you treat other people, how you expect to be treated yourself, and all of those kind of more moral compass type conversations. But it has to come from within the community. Kids don't learn from being told something; they have to live it. And you'll see this in your own children that they mimic you, whether you want them to or not. They do. They'll have your accent, they'll have your mannerisms, they'll have your facial expressions. Even if you don't want them to, they will, because that's what they're surrounded by. So it's the same with learning those bigger aspects of personality and character, if you like. As a school, it has to be the ethos and the culture.
Well, that gets us ready right for our next question. So this is a loaded question, of course. What do you think are the best 3 international schools in Tokyo right now? Also, are there some Japanese curriculum schools that you think also do a good job with international focused education?
This is a very dangerous question to ask me, and I'm of course going to be entirely diplomatic with this. I can't say which 3 schools are the best 3, because the schools in Tokyo are all very different, and for different families, the top 3 will be different. So you'll be looking for a certain type of curriculum. You might be looking for a gender-specific school. You might be looking for a religious school. You might be looking for something that's got a particular sport. So you can't categorize which are the top 3. I think I'm excruciatingly biased in my. In that I'm the British education through and through, and so I think the British school in Tokyo has an excellent reputation with that, and I would always maintain that. But of course, you've got all of the other schools here that offer those different curriculums. So you can find the American curriculum here, you can find the IB here, you can find a Montessori approach here. You've got schools that offer the IB diploma course, which is excellent, and so there are choices for everybody, is what I would say diplomatically. And there are excellent aspects to each of those schools, depending what you're looking for. In terms of thinking about the Japanese sector and where they're offering good provision, I think there are a lot of really fantastic Japanese schools in the city. The 2 that I'm most familiar with, and I spent most of my 17 years at BST right next door to, is SKG, which is Shibuya Kyoiku Gakuen, which is a fantastic Japanese school with really high expectations, but they have an excellent returnee program. So their English program is brilliant. So for students who are bilingual, it's very difficult to get in, but if you can get in there, it's a really fantastic school, and they have a really great provision there. They have bronze medal winning judo students there, Olympic bronze medal.
Oh,
so
wow.
they have a really high expectation, and I've always really respected that school. And I think another one that's got a great reputation would be Hiro Gakuen as well. That's got a really excellent outcome for students who have got who want to be challenged academically, but also with languages too.
So you mentioned your company Quest is also going to begin providing services for children with learning challenges. How are you going to enter this field?
I'm glad you asked that question. This is a project that we are really in the middle of developing right now. There are a lot of families in Tokyo who find it difficult to find school places for their children who've got learning differences, and also find it challenging to find the right kind of therapy. There are lots of fantastic places to get that in Tokyo, but I think sometimes families find it difficult to locate them, and also find a way to get those services in a connected way. Often finding an educational psychologist in one direction, a speech therapist in another direction, an occupational therapist in another direction. It's difficult to get some sort of connectivity between those services. So we want to open a Quest special needs hub where parents will be able to come to get the full sort of suite of services, if you like. So to come and get an assessment, to get a written report with recommendations, to be able to source the therapies that they need, but also to be able to find community and resources, because parents, of course, become really deep specialists in the kinds of needs that their children have. And it's a real opportunity to share amongst each other the experiences that they're having and what kind of recommendations they would make as well. So we're looking at a hub where that would happen. But we're also looking on the other side where to support schools, because at the moment schools have students coming in where in some cases, teachers are not quite trained enough to deal with that. And, one head teacher described to me that they wanted a red telephone on their desk that they could just ring up the hub and say, can we have 3 hours of training on dyslexia, or can we, or, whatever else they may need. And I think that as a head teacher, I very much experienced that. We had children joining the school who had all sorts of different needs, and we could meet those needs to a point, but we needed to be trained more. And so we would be looking to offer that too. We are probably about a year, maybe 18 months away from opening that, but that's an area of work that we're focusing on right now.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I've never heard about this sort of a service in Tokyo. Would this be the first service of its kind, or are there other things out there?
There are other places out there, but often not a one-stop shop. There are places that might send you to other locations as well. So, but I'm not aware of a place that. I'd please cut that out. I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody. It might be out there. Right?
But you're really looking to create an integrated solution.
Yes, I'm looking to make things easy for parents to support their children and for schools to support the children, because at the end of the day, the student has to be in the middle of all of the work that we do, and the experience and the outcomes that they have need to be the biggest priority. So we need to make it as streamlined as we can. And at the moment, I think sometimes families find it quite difficult to get what they need. And so the goal is to make it as connected as possible.
That sounds very exciting, and just very happy to hear that is even happening here in Tokyo. Very cool.
Yeah, I think especially a lot of the people who have gone through international school, and also I've heard lots of anecdotes of people who had a sort of negative experience, or they had problems with bullying or kind of cultural gap issues. And so it's very important that services like this are becoming more of a thing in Tokyo, because I think this is a very underserved market. So
I've been talking to a lot of families and a lot of schools over the last few months, and I'd be if anybody wants to contact me through this to talk to me about what their needs might be or what they would be looking for in a hub like this, I'd be very, very willing to meet with them.
Yeah. So I guess finally, through all of your experiences here in Japan and education, do you have any funny anecdotes to share with us?
Oh my goodness, I've got a suitcase full of experiences with working with young children. Can be absolutely comical, as you can very well imagine. Let me think. I think, I've probably got one or two that would be fun to share. When I first started teaching, I had a group of year one students, so they're 5 and 6, and every Christmas I play the guitar very badly, but just enough to play Christmas songs with the kids. And every year I would practice with the children, and there was an old people's home that was just around the corner from our school. And we would practice our songs and get ready to go around and do a performance for them. And one particular year, I had a class that we got ready, and it was the afternoon when we were going to actually go on our visit, and everybody was sat ready in the morning. And I said, right, this afternoon, you can't tell children that age that you're doing something too far in advance. Otherwise, they talk about it for, are we going now? Are we going now? Are we going now? So you tell them nearer to the time. So I said, well, this afternoon we're going. So one of the girls put her hand up and said, oh, Miss O'Connor, I can't go. So I said, oh, why not? We've been practicing. She said, I'm a vegetarian. We're not going to eat the old people. We're just going to sing to them. And okay. Honestly, I don't know what she thought we were going to do, but she came. She was very happy singing.
That's great.
I can't go.
I'm a vegetarian. Yeah, come. And then I think another one, well, there's endless stream of them where you're out on playground duty and the kids are all playing and you're making sure they're all behaving properly, and a child runs up, Miss O'Connor, he said the M word. And I was thinking, I can think of lots of words you shouldn't be saying out here. I can't think of a single one that begins with M. And I said, What word did he say? He said married. Oh, how do you stop yourself just laughing? Of course, there's an endless stream of these kinds of little quips, but it makes the day go by.
No, for sure, for sure.
That reminds me of a very embarrassing experience from my kindergarten days. So apparently, when I was a kindergarten kid, my parents exposed me to a lot of improper words, and I was running around one day at this, small town. This was in rural Tennessee at a small town kindergarten, and apparently my parents got called in, and my parents were furious. They're like, "Why do you call us in for this?" But the teacher sat them down and said, "Your son has been in the schoolyard screaming, 'Pervert, pervert, pervert.'" and my parents told me they burst out laughing. They're like, "What's wrong with that? That's hilarious."
Oh man, Parker, I could just totally see a 5-6-year-old Parker doing this. This is great.
I still do it on Fridays and Sundays.
Oh my gosh. Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great to hear about your experiences in Japan, about Few Japan, and just the educational aspects to consider here in the Tokyo area.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to come
thank you very much. Our guests' interviews on Tokyo Wave are always educational. I think this episode was super duper educational with a true education expert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Hey, listeners, that's right. You listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.